Hi there, I'm Tim Autrey, and welcome to Principle Based Performance Improvement, where we combine timeless wisdom with modern science and practical tools to help you move yourself and your organization toward better, safer, and more productive outcomes. All right, so here we have the same pyramid, and as we talked about before, we have thoughts. Some of those thoughts generate feelings. Feelings pass through that red region to generate our choices, actions, and behaviors. Our choices, actions, and behaviors interact with the world around us to generate our results. So what we want to do now is we want to talk about the gap. The gap is significantly important to you and me. As a matter of fact, it's significantly important to humanity. The gap is where free will resides. It's in the gap that you and I decide whether we're going to react to something or whether we're going to think through it, come from a better place, and perhaps respond to something. The gap is what separates human beings from all other living creatures on the planet. We're the only ones really that have a gap, and I'll tell you where that gap comes from. The gap comes essentially from the limbic brain. Now, we already talked about the limbic brain. This is where our emotions reside. This is where our memories are all held. This is predominantly where our subconscious mind hangs out. And I mentioned earlier that the subconscious mind essentially runs our lives. So the stuff that's in there and all those neural connections are what make us us and give us our personality, which we're going to talk about shortly, and have tremendous impact on how we conduct our lives. I want to talk about that subconscious mind relative to its level of power in your life. So if you were to take your conscious problem-solving neocortex, logical thought part of your brain relative to its power, and let's say we were to equate it to area, square inches. If we were to say that the relative power of our neocortex is equivalent to, let's say, the surface area of the bottom of my shoes, which may be, 45 square inches or something like that. If that was the relative part of this part of your brain, your subconscious mind would be 11 square miles. Phenomenally powerful, phenomenally huge. And where it really interjects itself is in this thing called the gap. In the gap is where we choose what we're going to do with that, whether we're going to just blast through it and react, or whether we're going to be more calm and whether we're going to respond. So what's your tendency when you get into the gap? If somebody says something or does something to you that trips your trigger, I mentioned one of my triggers earlier was people leaving shopping carts in the middle of parking spots in a parking lot. And that's one of my triggers. Now, I have an opportunity every time that happens, or every time I see somebody flip a cigarette butt out of their window, or in the rare occasion, I can't even remember when the last time this was, but somebody does something and I feel disrespected. I mean, those are triggers, right? I have the option. I can either respond like this, or I can apply a few moments of brain and respond completely differently. And all of that happens in the gap. So let's talk about what's going on in here. You've had some thoughts. Something's coming in from the outside world. You've had some thoughts. Those generate feelings. And then, before you actually do anything about it, you pass through this gap. And this is where your limbic brain, based upon whatever the trigger mechanism was, pushes forward your memories, your experiences, the associated emotions, and you have the opportunity there to think about that, to be thoughtful about it and mindful about it, or you can just blast right through it. So let me use an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say that when you were in the first grade, your first grade teacher, her name was Miss Evans, was meaner. I mean, it was horrible. You generally liked school, but first grade sucked. And it seemed like every day you'd go into school, and for whatever reason, this woman had it in for you. And as it turned out, Miss Evans was about this tall. She almost always wore a red sweater, and she had shoulder-length blonde hair. Okay, so at the age of 6 or 7 in the first grade, you anchored in all of that, and it's all hanging out in your limbic brain. So now you're the age you are, and you're in a parking lot. Let's say you're going into the Target or the Walmart, and you parked your car, and you're heading on in, and you see this woman walking toward you, and it happens to be a woman about this tall, wearing a red sweater, shoulder-length blonde hair. Where does your mind immediately go? Oh my gosh, you had a traumatic experience in the first grade. That's Miss Evans. Is it really Miss Evans? Of course not. But that is a trigger for you because of the experiences you had way back in your childhood. Now, you have the opportunity to do something here with that experience, and if you just blast through your gap, you're likely to not treat that poor woman very kindly. She might be the nicest, most wonderful woman in the world. So you might be walking past her, you move over to the other side, you give her a dirty look, you avoid eye contact, or maybe as she walks past you, you give her one of the universal sign languages, right? Well, the point is, it's not really Miss Evans, but your mind has associated those memories of a woman this tall with shoulder-length blonde hair wearing a red sweater, and you've been triggered. So that's the kind of stuff that happens in the gap. Now that's an extreme example, but that's what's going on in there all the time. Your mind tells you a story. In this case, that's Miss Evans, and then you have the opportunity to react, as I just described. On the other hand, yeah, you can turn from that into this. On the other hand, you don't have to react. What you can do is you can apply a few moments of brain and then respond rather than react. Now, before I go any further, I want to anchor this in your mind as to what it feels like when you're in the middle of the gap. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody said something or did something to you and you just lashed back out at them? I mean, you let them have it. And then after the fact, you thought to yourself, man, I wish I hadn't said that. Ever done that? I know I have in my past. At the moment when you chose to lash back out at that other human being, you were smack dab in the middle of the gap. So now you know what that feels like. Something triggered you, your limbic brain told you a story, and you just lashed back out. Okay? However, what separates us from the other creatures on the planet is we have the opportunity to choose to do something different. So now we go back to this model. Something has triggered some negative feeling, sensation, emotion, or whatever in your brain, and it doesn't have to be negative, but something that might cause you to react. Your mind tells you a story, and then, rather than simply blasting through the gap and reacting, you allow a little bit of processing time. You give it a few moments of brain, and then you respond rather than react. And I'll give you a little back pocket tool. We call it the 4-second tool. Now, 4 seconds all by themselves is arbitrary, but if you just count to yourself 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, generically speaking, that gives you enough time to come down off the trigger, realize that the story that has been triggered by some emotion from when you were 7 years old is not what's going on here, and then you can respond rather than react. So sometimes, based upon what happened to you, it might take 4 days. But the point is, you do not want to react and blast through the gap. I love this quote right here from Ambrose Bierce, where he said, "Speak when you're angry and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret." Anybody, have you ever made a speech like that you've ever regretted? Boy, I know I sure have. So I love this. I'm going to tell you something. Understanding this and understanding the gap is one of a couple of things in this training. When I learned it, absolutely changed my life. When you can learn to stop reacting and learn to apply a few moments of brain and learn to respond, you will become a much more effective, powerful, sane, less stressed human being, let alone better leader and influencer. So this brings us to our next key insight, which is key insight number 13, which is, and notice we've provided this one for you in first person. And if you have an issue of blasting through the gap, I'd recommend you print this one out and put it wherever you want to put it. Make it your screensaver, put it right above your desk, put it on your mirror, wherever. I respond to circumstances rather than react to them. If you're finding these insights helpful, please share them with your friends and colleagues. Help your search engine find more content like this for you by hitting the like button before you leave. And if these PPI messages resonate with you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, my friend, be safe, stay humble, and make a difference.